Welcome to Meteorology Matters. We're diving into some significant weather right now unfolding across the central United States. You've probably heard about severe weather, but what's noteworthy here is this combination of really high-level threats impacting the same general areas. What do you think about this?
Yeah, it's definitely unusual. What makes this situation critical for you to understand is that we have a region facing a heightened likelihood of both intense tornadoes and dangerous flash flooding, potentially hitting back to back. This kind of dual high-risk scenario is something meteorologists only anticipate under very specific and frankly concerning atmospheric setups.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this Meteorology Matters, we're going to take a look at the atmospheric ingredients converging to produce this risk. We'll pinpoint the communities most likely to experience the effects, and we'll highlight what you need to be aware of to stay safe. For more detailed discussions and continuing updates, remember, you can follow meteorologist Rob Jones on Instagram, meteorologist on TikTok, TV meteorologist, and on YouTube, follow Rob Jones Hurricane, where you can also find the Meteorology Matters podcast playlist. Okay, let's get into this. Beginning with the tornado concern. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Storm Prediction Center has issued a high-edge risk for tornadoes for Wednesday. To really underscore how infrequent this level of alert statistically occurs less than 1% of the time. This high-risk zone encompasses significant locations like Memphis, Paducah, and extends along a considerable portion of the Ohio River Valley. Do you think that's a good summation?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, and if you reside within these designated high-risk zones today, your chances of experiencing a violent tornado are actually 3 times greater. That's a substantial increase. What's really driving this high risk is that conditions are expected to be highly conducive to the development of isolated supercell thunderstorms.
Yeah, and those are rotating thunderstorms.
Yeah, and those are the ones that can hold the greatest potential to generate the most severe weather.
Okay, and these aren't your typical thunderstorms. We're talking about an increased likelihood of very large hail, possibly exceeding the size of golf balls, widespread damaging winds, and that considerable threat of tornadoes, and some of these could be quite powerful, potentially reaching EF2 or even EF3 plus intensity. Now, when we talk about EF2 and EF3, for someone just tuning in, what kind of damage are we talking about? What do those numbers mean?
Yeah, so an EF2 tornado can cause significant damage, like tearing roofs off well-built homes, overturning train cars. An EF3 is even more intense, capable of causing severe damage to even sturdy buildings, leveling well-constructed homes, and throwing cars into the air.
Oh, wow. That really paints a picture. What's the time frame here that people should be aware of?
So the critical period extends from the afternoon hours into the evening, and in some areas this threat could even persist overnight. And it's really important for folks to remember that nighttime tornadoes pose a greater danger simply because visibility is reduced.
Right, so then you can't really see it coming as easily.
Exactly.
So what kind of alerts should people be paying attention to? We're likely to see tornado watches issued perhaps in the early afternoon. In this kind of situation, what does a watch actually signify?
Well, a tornado watch signifies that atmospheric conditions are favorable for the development of tornadic supercells within a relatively short time frame, perhaps within the next hour or two. It serves as a cue to be exceptionally vigilant, have your safety plan in readiness, and stay tuned for further updates.
Right, so it's kind of like be prepared.
Yeah, be prepared. Things could happen.
Right, exactly. And then the more urgent alert is a tornado warning. What's the crucial distinction there? What does that mean for folks?
So a tornado warning means that a tornado is either occurring or is imminent based on radar indications or visual confirmation. When a tornado warning is issued for your specific location, immediate shelter is absolutely essential.
So a warning means
Danger is here or imminent. Take shelter now.
got it. And folks, this is really important. Mobile homes simply do not provide adequate protection from strong tornadoes like the ones that are possible today.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Mobile homes are particularly vulnerable to damage, even from lower-end tornadoes. And given the potential for EF2 or stronger tornadoes within this high-risk area, anyone residing in a mobile home should make arrangements to seek shelter in a robust, site-built structure, ideally one with a below-ground option, such as a basement.
Yeah, so now this severe weather concern doesn't conclude with the tornado potential. We also face a significant and unusually overlapping risk of flash flooding. Let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, so this high GH risk for flash flooding is anticipated for Thursday and Friday, and it affects the same general area that is under the tornado threat today. While a high risk for flash flooding is issued somewhat more frequently than for tornadoes, about 4% of the time, it's still critical to understand that these events account for a substantial portion of all flood-related losses.
Right. So what is the primary factor driving this significant flood risk?
Well, the danger arises from what meteorologists term training thunderstorms.
Huh.
You can picture a series of storms repeatedly moving over the same track, in this case, the same geographical locations, allowing for very heavy rainfall to accumulate over a relatively short duration.
And when we mention significant rainfall, what kind of totals are we anticipating here?
So localized rainfall totals could reach a very substantial 10 to 12 inches. Some computer models are even indicating potential 24-hour totals exceeding 5 to 8 inches, particularly across a corridor extending from Arkansas into western Kentucky.
Wow, that's a lot of rain.
It is.
And it sounds like this could be a sustained event.
It is. Total rainfall by the end of the week could approach or even exceed a foot in parts of the Mississippi and Ohio valleys. And when you consider that the ground in many of these areas is already saturated from previous rainfall, the risk of dangerous flash flooding becomes even more pronounced.
Yeah, so where's the area of greatest concern for this intense rainfall and flooding?
The most intense rainfall and the highest flood threat appear to be centered around the intersection of Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Some forecasts are even suggesting that this region could see upwards of 15 inches of rain. The National Weather Service in Paducah, Kentucky, used very strong language, suggesting this could be a generational flooding event, potentially equaling 2 months' worth of typical rainfall in just a few days.
Oh my gosh, a generational flood, that's something you don't hear every day. What specific factors make this potential flooding so historically significant?
Well, a stalled weather front is the key factor here. This front is acting like a conduit, drawing a significant amount of moisture directly from the Gulf of Mexico into the central United States, providing the fuel for these repeated heavy downpours.
So let's take a step back for a moment. We've discussed a high risk for tornadoes, followed by a high risk for flash flooding in essentially the same area within a very short period. How unusual is this kind of back-to-back threat?
This co-occurrence is indeed described as an extremely unusual episode and a significant severe weather threat. It's not something you see very often at all.
And since the year 2000, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Storm Prediction Center has only issued 66 high-risk days for tornadoes nationwide. That really highlights just how uncommon a high-risk designation is,
Right.
making today's situation all the more noteworthy. So what kind of impacts are already being observed, and what can people in the affected areas anticipate? We've already seen severe thunderstorms erupting on Tuesday night across the central U.S., signaling the beginning of this multi-day threat. Millions of people, from Texas all the way up to Illinois, are under some level of threat from this weather system right now.
And we're seeing the typical responses you'd expect, right?
Yeah, weather alerts, including both watches and warnings for severe thunderstorms and tornadoes, are being issued across the central U.S. And it's important to remember that some of these same areas were recently impacted by deadly storms in mid-March and even an ice storm in Michigan. So there's a possibility of compounding impacts here. It's sobering to think about communities potentially facing both violent winds and then devastating floods within such a short period. What specific dangers should people be aware of regarding the flash flooding threat later in the week?
Well, flash flooding can be incredibly dangerous. It can inundate entire towns very quickly, and the force of the water can easily sweep away vehicles. It's crucial to never drive or walk through floodwaters.
Yeah, turn around, don't drown.
Exactly.
That's really important advice. We also know that severe weather often brings other challenges.
Right.
Power outages are certainly possible due to the severe thunderstorms, with damaging winds and potential tree damage. We saw widespread outages recently in Michigan and Wisconsin following ice storms.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a real concern with this event as well. It sounds like communities are already taking precautions. Yeah, we're hearing reports of some schools in the affected areas that have already arranged early dismissals for students and canceled after-school activities in anticipation of the severe weather. One final point that's noteworthy is the location of some of this heavy rainfall.
Okay.
The heaviest rains are currently forecast to fall in the New Madrid seismic zone. For those unfamiliar, that's a region with a history of significant earthquakes. Researchers there are actively monitoring for seismic events, and they are taking precautions to protect their monitoring stations from the potential flooding.
That's interesting. Well, this situation in the central U.S. truly illustrates the immense power and sometimes perilous nature of our weather systems. The combination of a high-end tornado threat immediately followed by a significant risk of widespread and potentially historic flooding underscores just how vital it is to stay informed and to understand the specific hazards that could impact your community.
That's the crucial point. While we've outlined the major aspects of this developing weather event based on the information available right now, it's essential to remember that weather conditions can and do change rapidly. Continuously monitoring your local forecasts and immediately heeding any warnings issued by the National Weather Service are critical steps for your safety. Consider what we've discussed today, the very rare occurrence of this dual high-risk scenario, and the potential for substantial and far-reaching impacts. What does an event like this suggest about the increasing frequency of extreme weather events we seem to be experiencing? It's certainly a question that warrants your further consideration. For more in-depth analysis and continuing updates, please remember to follow meteorologist Rob Jones on Instagram, meteorologist, on TikTok, TV meteorologist, and on YouTube follow Rob Jones Hurricane, where you can also find the Meteorology Matters podcast playlist.